Hello everyone, welcome to Cashcroft TV. My name is Kalen Ashcroft. Thank you very much for watching this video on Ages of Empires, where we will be covering all of the major world empires, or endeavoring to do such. As well, we will be covering a leader from each empire, and also having a comparison between each respective leader in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives. Today, we will be covering Apophis of the Hyksos Empire and Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire. Eventually, I'll get that correct. Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire. So, and each history of each respective empire will be done in the style of the rise and fall of each respective empire. So, without further ado, we will begin with Apophis of the Hyksos Empire. So, starting with the rise and fall of the Hyksos Empire, a saga of power and intrigue. So the Hyksos Empire, an enigmatic and influential civilization in the ancient Near East, emerged during the Second Intermediate Period of ancient Egypt. Their ascendancy marked a pivotal era in the region's history, as they established a dynasty that would rule parts of Egypt for nearly a century. This narrative aims to unravel the complex tale of the Hyksos Empire, from its humble beginnings to its eventual decline and expulsion from the land of the pharaohs. So if you have watched previously on this series of Ages of Empires, we have covered the Old Kingdom of Egypt as well as the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. We aren't quite in the New Kingdom of Egypt, so this is part of the intermediate period. So this is actually what's considered the 15th dynasty of ancient Egypt. However, it's not considered part of, for example, the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, because it was from the city of Avaris controlled the region of Egypt. So it's a separate dynasty, and therefore considered the Hyksos Empire. So important, if you haven't previously, I'd recommend you watch my previous episodes on the Old Kingdom of Egypt as well as the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. And eventually I will also create the New Kingdom of Egypt. So moving to the dawn of the Hyksos Empire, circa 1800 BCE to circa 1650 BCE. Around 1800 BCE, a mysterious people known as the Hyksos arrived in the Nile Delta. Likely of Semitic or West Asian origin, they settled in the eastern Nile Delta, particularly in the region known as Avaris. At this time, Egypt was in a state of turmoil, with weakened central authority and regional conflicts, hence the ultimate decline, as we covered in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. So we're now in the intermediate period. The Hyksos, seizing the opportunity, began to consolidate power in Lower Egypt. Moving to origins and migration, the origins of the Hyksos remain a subject of scholarly debate. Some theorists suggest they may have come from regions such as Canaan or Levant. Their arrival in Egypt marked a significant demographic shift as they integrated into the local population. Moving to consolidation of power, the Hyksos' rise to power was facilitated by the internal strife of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. They gradually established their authority over Lower Egypt, utilizing a combination of diplomatic strategies and military force. Over time, they adopted Egyptian customs and culture, creating a unique synthesis of Hyksos and Egyptian traditions. Moving to the Hyksos dynasty, the Hyksos rulers adopted Egyptian titles and practices, effectively creating a dynasty that ruled from their capital, Avaris. This city, located in the northeastern delta, became a vibrant hub of commerce and cultural exchange. The Hyksos' influence began to permeate various aspects of Egyptian society, from governance to religion. So it's important to note, as we covered both in the Old Kingdom of Egypt and the Middle Kingdom of Egypt, that these two empires were engaged in trade. So naturally, this empire coming from Avaris also engaged in trade and diplomacy. However, unlike perhaps the Egyptian empires previously, it was multi-ethnic, because these people, the Hyksos, supposedly came from Canaan or Levant. Moving to the Hyksos dynasty. So the Hyksos rulers adopted Egyptian titles and practices, effectively creating a dynasty that ruled from their capital, Avaris, so a different capital city. This city, located in the northeastern delta, became a vibrant hub of commerce and cultural exchange, and they began to permeate various aspects of Egyptian society, from governance to religion, as previously mentioned. Moving to the Hyksos ascendancy, circa 1650 BCE to circa 1550 BCE. So as the Hyksos Empire continued to consolidate its power, it experienced a period of unprecedented prosperity and influence in the ancient Near East. Unprecedented is an old statement considering what greatness had been done in the Middle Kingdom of Egypt and the Old Kingdom of Egypt. It might be added that the Great Pyramid of Giza, which is probably the greatest achievement that we can see last until this day, was created in the Old Kingdom of Egypt. So even, I would say, of the three, perhaps the Old Kingdom of Egypt might have achieved the greatest achievement in terms of architectural endeavors. Herodotus, in the histories, notes there was supposedly a labyrinth, which is even greater than the greatest of the pyramids, even greater than the Pyramid of Giza. However, it no longer exists today. Supposedly, they have found its remnants, and supposedly it's not nearly as great from what we can see of these remnants, but I like to believe that perhaps Herodotus was correct and there was something greater than the pyramids. It's quite exciting. There were 12 sections, and apparently if somebody was not familiar with a map or did not know the map, the layout, they could get lost and die within the labyrinth. So fascinating thing. But nonetheless, supposedly these Hyksos achieved an even greater level of prosperity and influence than even the Old Kingdom of Egypt. But up to debate. Moving to further details in regards to their economic prosperity. So the strategic location of the Hyksos-controlled region in the Nile Delta facilitated extensive trade networks between Egypt, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. So as we noted, the three major ancient civilizations were ancient Egypt, which we can, by analogy, also include, or by connection, include the Hyksos. There's also Mesopotamia, as we've covered many of the civilizations, such as Lasha, or the Sumer as well, and the Sumer civilization. One might debate whether that's a empire or not. But then there was also the Indus Valley civilization, more close to India. Avaris became a cosmopolitan city. I think that's natural, considering it already had at least two ethnic groups as the Hyksos had arrived, attracting merchants and artisans from across the ancient Near East. This economic prosperity contributed to the wealth and stability of the Hyksos Empire. So, as I mentioned previously, that not only is trade good for the state in terms of creating wealth for the people, but also it's sort of a form of diplomacy. If one is a trading partner, perhaps they're less likely to go to battle against each other if they have long-lasting trade relationships. Moving to technological and military advancements, one of the defining features of the Hyksos Empire was its military prowess. The Hyksos introduced innovative military techniques, including the use of horse-drawn chariots and composite bows. These advancements provided them with a significant military advantage over neighboring powers, solidifying their dominance in their region. So there's a lot of the warfare techniques they had were very advanced, and they were adopted by later the New Kingdom of Egypt. You can see a spearhead here on the slide, but they also had this axe head. It's called a duckbill shaped that I encourage you to look into. Moving to cultural exchange, the Hyksos fostered a period of rich cultural exchange between their own society and that of the Egyptians, including the use of horse-drawn chariots and composite bows. Pardon me, that was the technological and military advancements. Moving to cultural exchange. The Hyksos fostered a period of rich cultural exchange between their own society and that of the Egyptians. This exchange influenced various aspects of Egyptian culture, including art, architecture, and language. The Hyksos deities were integrated into the Egyptian pantheon, reflecting a profound fusion of religious practices. Moving to the decline and challenges, circa 1550 BCE to 1500 BCE. However, the Hyksos Empire faced mounting challenges from the resurgent Egyptian kingdoms. Internal conflicts and external pressure led to the reunification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the rule of the Theban pharaohs. Moving to the resurgent Egyptian kingdoms, Pharaoh Ahmose first emerged as a charismatic and determined leader who spearheaded the campaign to reclaim the Nile Delta from the Hyksos. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Ahmose I rallied the forces of Upper Egypt and initiated a concerted effort to expel the Hyksos from Egyptian soil. So we'll cover this more in the New Kingdom of Egypt, but this is what happened at the fall of the Hyksos Empire. Moving to the War of Liberation, so the conflict between the Theban pharaohs and the Hyksos was marked by a series of fierce battles, protracted sieges, and political maneuvering. The Theban forces exhibited remarkable resilience and strategic acumen, gradually gaining ground against the entrenched Hyksos in the delta. Moving to the fall of Avaris, their capital city. In a climactic siege, the Theban forces surrounded the captured Avaris, effectively ending Hyksos rule in the Nile Delta. The Hyksos, recognizing the tides of history, retreated to their Anatolian or Lebanite homelands, leaving behind a legacy of cultural exchange and transformed Egyptian landscape. So they came, they conquered, and they sort of went back home, or to where they originally came from. Moving to legacy and historical significance of the Hyksos Empire. So cultural influence to start. The Hyksos period left an enduring imprint on Egyptian culture. That's one of my guess. Their introduction of new military technologies, such as the chariot or the spearhead, and it's possible that even horses were introduced by the Hyksos. Elements of Hyksos influence can be observed in various aspects of Egyptian society, from military tactics to religious practices. Moving to lessons of resilience. The rise and fall of the Hyksos Empire serves as a testament to the ebb and flow of a period of power in ancient Egypt. It underscores the importance of adaptability and resilience in the face of geopolitical challenges. The Hyksos Empire's legacies endure as a reminder of the enduring impact of the intercultural exchange and inevitable cycles of power. So, as great as Egypt was, someone else controlled them for a period. Moving to the conclusion. Thus, the Hyksos Empire's ascent and ultimate decline constitute a pivotal chapter in the annals of ancient Near Eastern history. Their influence on Egypt, both culturally and militarily, reverberated through subsequent dynasties. The legacy of the Hyksos Empire endures as a testament to the intricate interplay of migration, innovation, and conflict that shaped the ancient world. So a very, very fascinating group that to control over ancient Egypt was an incredible feat, and the fact that they were sort of a different ethnic group that came, perhaps they saw the Middle King of Egypt, admired it, and came to rule over it is very, very fascinating. So moving into Apophis, one of the greatest leaders of the Hyksos Empire, also known as Apepi. I think his official Wikipedia article is Apepi, but Apophis seems to be the more favored last name. I think it's the more Greek version, but also known as Apophis of Avaris, which is the capital city that the Hyksos ruled from. And the pinnacle of Hyksos power and influence is that time that he ruled over. So in the annals of ancient history, few figures stand as prominently as Apophis of Avaris, the paramount leader of the Hyksos Empire. Born into a tumultuous era, Apophis rose to power through shrewd diplomacy, military prowess, and a keen understanding of the complex socio-political landscape of ancient Egypt. We will here endeavor to unravel the life and legacy of Apophis, a leader whose reign shaped the destiny of the Hyksos Empire and left an unparalleled mark on the course, or an indelible mark on the course of ancient Near Eastern civilization. Starting with his early years and ascension, circa 1750 BCE to circa 1700 BCE. So starting with his birth and lineage, Apophis was born into a time of upheaval amid the migration of the Hyksos into the Nile Delta. His exact birth date and familial origins remain shrouded in mystery, but it is believed that he hailed from a noble Hyksos lineage, possibly with ties to the Levant. So a question that occurred to me perhaps now is maybe it's not that they came to endeavoring to conquer the Egyptians. I seem to think that's more likely. Perhaps they were fleeing from something in perhaps Syria or Levant. Moving to the turbulent era, the period in which Apophis came of age was marked by the weakening of the Middle Kingdom of Egypt. Regional conflicts and internal strife created fertile ground for the Hyksos to assert their influence. Apophis, displaying early signs of astute political acumen, navigated the volatile landscape with remarkable dexterity. Moving to his rise to power, through a combination of diplomacy and strategic alliances, Apophis ascended to a position of prominence within the Hyksos hierarchy. His charisma, keen intellect, and tactical brilliance distinguished him amongst his contemporaries, paving the way for his eventual assumption as of paramount leadership. I've heard a debate that perhaps they did not call the leader pharaoh, and perhaps he was called king rather, but even then it would be, these are translated words, or pharaoh is not a translated word, but king is König, is German, of German descent, but perhaps there was a different name, not pharaoh, for the king. Moving to the apex of power, circa 1700 BCE to circa 1660 BCE, so just by the dates, perhaps he was around 50 years old at this time. Starting with the consolidation of authority. With Apophis at helm, the Hyksos Empire entered an unprecedented era of stability and expansion. Avaris, the capital city, blossomed into a cosmopolitan hub, drawing merchants, scholars, and artisans from across the ancient Near East. Apophis skillfully blended Hyksos and the Egyptian customs, forging a unique cultural identity that resonated throughout the empire. So the fact that he was able to appreciate both cultures probably led to much of his success. And perhaps one of the defining features of what is an empire is that it's multi-ethnic or multicultural. So if one reads between the lines too much, maybe even one could say the Egyptian empire was not even an empire, which I think would be a fallacy. But for those who say that it must encompass multiple cultures, then that might even discount Egypt. But nonetheless, this was certainly an empire because it included Egyptians and the Hyksos. And one of the reasons of Apophis' success was that he was able to blend the two cultures, or appreciate both cultures. Moving to economic prosperity, under Apophis' judicious rule, the Hyksos Empire thrived economically. Avaris, strategically situated in the Nile Delta, became a pivotal point of trade, facilitating commerce between Egypt, the Levant, and Mesopotamia. Interesting that they had traded with Levant, perhaps because they had that heritage in Levant, they opened up that trade network, or perhaps those trade networks were already greatly established, which maybe is perhaps more likely. This economic vitality fueled the empire's continued growth and prosperity. Also, as I mentioned, it might diffuse warfare or external threats by engaging in trade. Moving to his military innovations, one of Apophis' most enduring legacies was his transformation of the Hyksos military. Recognizing the strategic advantage of technological advancements, he introduced the use of horse-drawn chariots and the composite bow. So two huge innovations. The chariots, imagine not having a chariot and the chariot comes racing at you, and perhaps they didn't even have horses. These two things chasing at you would be very hard to take on. And the composite bow, one might be incredibly skilled with a sword, but somebody brings out a composite bow is really quite challenging. These innovations revolutionized warfare in the ancient Near East, propelling the Hyksos Empire to military dominance. Moving to challenges and diplomatic endeavors, circa 1660 BCE to circa 1620 BCE, starting with external pressures. So as the Hyksos Empire flourished, neighboring powers grew increasingly wary of its ascendancy, particularly the former Egyptian Empire. The resurgent Egyptian kingdoms, particularly in Upper Egypt, sought to reclaim their lost territories in the Delta. Apophis confronted mounting external pressures with a combination of strategic alliances and deft diplomatic maneuvers, so not engaging directly in warfare when he didn't need to, but also being a great in terms of alliances and diplomacy. Moving to the Hyksos-Egyptian nexus. Apophis recognized the need for a delicate balance between Hyksos and Egyptian interests. He skillfully integrated both elements of both cultures, adopting Egyptian titles and religious practices. Supposedly not, however, the title pharaoh itself, but maybe he did use that title, but also religious practices, so they included possibly Egyptian religion too. This syncretism not only solidified his authority, but also served as a testament to his ability to navigate the intricate socio-political dynamics of the era. So syncretism means multi-religious. Moving to the decline and legacy of Apophis, circa 1620 BCE to circa 1580 BCE, starting with the War of Liberation. So the resurgent Egyptian pharaohs, led by figures like Ahmose I, as previously mentioned, mounted a formidable campaign to reclaim the Nile Delta from the Hyksos. Apophis faced a relentless onslaught characterized by protracted sieges and strategic maneuverings. Despite his tenacity, the tides of history began to turn against him, so maybe all these great military technologies that they created perhaps were later adopted by those in Upper Egypt and perhaps even used against them, but also military siege becomes a big factor here. Moving to the fall of Avaris. So in a climatic siege, Avaris fell to the forces of Ahmose I. The Hyksos Empire, though resilient, could not withstand the combined might of a reunified Egypt. So it's important to note that they didn't go straight at Avaris first. They combined Upper Egypt first and then came for Avaris. Recognizing the inevitability of defeat, Apophis and his followers retreated to their Anatolian and Levantine homelands. We went to the enduring legacy. While the Hyksos Empire fell, Apophis's legacy endures in the annals of ancient history. His strategic brilliance, diplomatic finesse, and cultural syncretism left an indelible mark on the ancient Near East. The military innovations he introduced continue to shape the course of warfare for centuries to come, such as the chariot, such as the duck-bill axe, I believe it's called, and even the use of horse potentially. Thus, Apophis of Avaris stands as a colossus in the tapestry of ancient Near Eastern history. His visionary leadership and an indomitable spirit guided the Hyksos Empire to unprecedented heights of power and influence. Though ultimately thwarted by the forces of a resurgent Egypt, Apophis's legacy endures as a testament to the enduring impact of exceptional leadership in shaping the course of civilizations. So, very, very fascinating leader and very fascinating, though short-lived, empire. It's important to note that Apophis was the second to last leader of the Hyksos Empire, as we'll see in discussing the slide, but also the pinnacle, but also saw its turn as well. So a very dynamic period for him. So to discuss the slide, in the top left we have a scarab of Apophis, which is the mark of Apophis, including his last pranom, his last name. The title of this slide is Apophis and the Hyksos Empire. The title of the Hyksos Empire is the foreign 15th dynasty of the ancient Egypt. So it's the 15th dynasty to rule over ancient Egypt. However, it was foreign. In terms of some information, a significant leader, Apophis, or Epi, Empire, Hyksos, period circa 1650 to circa 1550 BCE. One might say that it perhaps started earlier, as early as 1800 BCE. That was sort of the period of its peak was sort of 1650 to 1550 BCE. And this is included as part of the second intermediate period of ancient Egypt after the Middle Kingdom of ancient Egypt. Modern location, Egypt, million square kilometers, 0.65, which is very massive. I think it's the largest we've actually seen so far because it included at one point all of ancient Egypt. Million square miles, 0.25% of the world, 0.48%, that's excluding Antarctica, but supposedly this was the most developed place in the world, so very significant. So maybe only 0.48%, but some of the most fertile land at the time. Capital city, Avaris, which they ruled out of, which differed from the pharaohs of Egypt. Government, monarchy. Common languages, Semitic, and potentially a Canaanite dialect, supposedly if they came from Canaan. Religion, syncretism, which is multi-religious, and possibly Egyptian dominant. Population, 500,000 to a few millions, so ranged over time, and those are that's the threshold that it might have been, or the range, pardon me. In terms of images, in the top left we have the symbols of the Hyksos Empire. That's someone's fascinated in language. That's how to write Hyksos Empire. To the right we have some sphinxes which were actually created by Pharaoh Amenemhat III. However, they were reinscribed by the Hyksos as their own, so quite an interesting phenomenon. Below that we have a rind mathematical papyrus, so showing some of their mathematical sophistication. Below that they have one of their spearheads, one of a testament to their military prowess. To the right we have what's called an image of Abisha the Hyksos, which is the earliest known reference to the Hyksos. To the right of that we have horses, which were potentially introduced to the Egyptians by the Hyksos. Perhaps that's how they traveled to this region to begin with, but also after this time period, horses became a popular component of art. Above that we have a chariot, which was also founded by supposedly the Hyksos and also introduced by the Egyptians and perhaps even used against them for a time. And above that we have the map, which shows where Avaris was located, the Nile Delta, and also the Egyptian region. And to the left of that we have the full list of kings of the Hyksos Empire, from Salitis or Saites, who's reigned for 19 years, Manon, who reigned for 44 years, Apaknan or Paknan, who reigned for 36 or 61 years, Ianas or Stan, who reigned for 50 years, Apophis, who reigned for 61 years, and Acroles or Assis, who reigned for 40 years. So that is Apophis and the Hyksos Empire. We will discuss Apophis a little bit more in the comparison with, if I can pronounce his name, Suppiluliuma the First. Maybe I'll find a way to shorten that so I don't keep butchering it. But nonetheless, and we'll learn a little bit more about the Hyksos Empire in the comparison as well. So, starting with the rise and fall of the Hittite Empire. So the old Hittite Empire, some people do divide it into the old, middle, and new King Hittite Empire. However, little information is known about these three, so kind of group them together, and I hope you'll not be offended by that, but also the peak was also the new one as well. So nonetheless, the Hittite Empire, also known as the Hittite Kingdom, was an ancient Anatolian civilization that emerged in the 17th century BCE. It flourished in what is now modern-day Turkey and played a crucial role in the geopolitics of the ancient Near East. This empire left an indelible mark on the history through its military conquests, sophisticated legal system, and contributions to culture and religion. Here we will delve into the key events, influential leaders, and factors that led to the rise and eventual decline of the old Hittite Empire. Starting with early origins and rise. Starting with Hattusa, the birthplace of civilization. So the story of the Hittite Empire began in the 17th century BCE when a group of Indo-European speaking people known as the Hatti settled in a region of central Anatolia. They established their capital, Hattusa, near the present-day site of Boğazkali, Turkey. Hattusa would become the epicenter of the Hittite power and culture. Moving to Hattusili and the first and the founding dynasty. Around 1650 BCE, Hattusili the first emerged as a prominent figure among the Hittites. He was a military leader and statesman who laid the groundwork for the empire's expansion. Under his rule, the Hittites began to expand their influence beyond the borders of Hattusa, primarily through strategic alliances and military conquests. So far, all the empires had depended both on strategic alliances and military conquests. Moving to expansion and diplomacy, starting with Mursili I and the first major conquests. Mursili I, the grandson of Hattusili I, ascended to the throne in early 16th century BCE. He is remembered for launching successful military campaigns that extended Hittite dominion into the neighboring regions, including parts of Syria and Mesopotamia. These conquests established the Hittites as a formidable force in the ancient Near East. Moving to diplomacy with Egypt, so during the reign of Pharaoh Akhenaten in Egypt, Hittite-Egyptian relations underwent a significant transformation. The marriage of Akhenaten's daughter to the Hittite prince sealed a historic peace treaty between the two powers. This diplomatic achievement marked a turning point in the international relations and helped stabilize the region, and also ultimately give this family significant power. Moving to the great kings, starting with Suppiluliuma the First, expansion and intrigue. Suppiluliuma the First. So Suppiluliuma the First, one of the most illustrious Hittite rulers, ascended to power in the mid-14th century BCE. He continued the policy of territorial expansion, pushing the borders of the empire even further. His reign, however, was also marked by internal strife and court intrigues, and we'll discuss this later in a more detailed biography. Moving to Mursili II and the Great Plague. Mursili II faced a major crisis during his rule, the outbreak of a devastating plague. This pandemic weakened the empire's infrastructure and led to a decline in the population. Despite this, Mursili II managed to maintain Hittite control over most of their territories. Now moving to the decline and collapse of the Hittite Empire, starting with the Sea peoples and external pressures. So in the 13th century BCE, the Hittite Empire faced a formidable external threat, the Sea peoples, they're called. This confederation of seafaring peoples launched a coordinated attack on various Mediterranean civilizations, including the Hittites. The Sea peoples' assaults, combined with pressure from neighboring powers, strained the Hittite defenses. So I was a little fascinated about these Sea peoples. I'd never heard about them, so here's a little bit more detail about the Sea peoples. So the Sea peoples were a confederation of various seafaring groups and tribes that conducted a series of major attacks and invasions in the eastern Mediterranean region during the late Bronze Age, roughly from the late 13th century BCE to the early 12th century BCE. The Sea peoples were a complex amalgamation of different ethnic groups, so kind of almost thinking like they're like some pirates, some of which are known by the name of ancient Egyptian and other sources. These included the Peliset, often identified with the Philistines, Tujeker, Shekelesh, Denyen, often associated with the Greeks, and others, so ranging from the Philistines to the Greeks to the Egyptians, or various different ethnic groups. The exact origins and identities of all these groups remain a subject of scholarly debate, and I wonder also, I don't think they had too much of a centralized leader, otherwise I think they could be considered an empire in their own right. But it's strange that there was this sort of phenomenon of piracy attacking at this point. Going back to the Hittite Empire, moving to internal struggles and rebellion. Simultaneously, the Hittite Empire grappled with internal dissent. Factions within the empire vied for power, and regions of periphery grew increasingly autonomous. So once again, this loss of centralization or decentralization as external, or the periphery starts to become more powerful. This internal turmoil further weakened the central authority. And so in the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, what happens is the Praetorians, who are the guards, they cause the first sort of ultimate collapse of the center of Rome, but then it's the legions come in from the outside and sort of really get the final blow, or not the final blow, but one of the most significant second blows, probably the most significant second blow. Moving to the fall of Hattusa. By the early 12th century BCE, Hattusa fell to a combination of factors: external pressures, as mentioned, internal conflicts, as mentioned, and the erosion of centralized power control, also mentioned. The city was abandoned, therefore, marking the end of the Hittite Empire. Thus, the Hittite Empire, spanning over 6 centuries, left an enduring legacy in the annals of ancient history. Its rise, characterized by military conquests and diplomatic ingenuity, established the Hittites as a dominant force in the ancient Near East. However, the empire's decline and eventual collapse were precipitated by a confluence of internal and external pressures. Despite its fall, the Hittite civilization's cultural, legal, and religious contributions continue to resonate through the ages, reminding us of the enduring impact of this remarkable empire. So now into a biography of this most important leader, who I struggle in pronouncing, Suppiluliuma, the first conqueror and statesman of the Hittite Empire. So Suppiluliuma I, the 10th ruler of the Hittite Empire, emerged as an indomitable force in the annals of ancient history. His reign, spanning from approximately 1344 BCE to 1322 BCE, so only 22 years, witnessed the zenith of Hittite power and influence. Renowned for his military prowess, strategic brilliance, and adept diplomatic skills, Suppiluliuma stood as the preeminent figure in the Hittite Empire. Thus, we will now illuminate the life, achievements, and enduring legacy of this exceptional ruler. Starting with his early life and formative years, starting with his noble lineage and ancestral heritage. Born into a noble Hittite family, Suppiluliuma I hailed as a distinguished lineage that traced its roots to the legendary Labarna, the founder of the Hittite kingdom. This heritage imbued with him a profound sense of duty and a deep connection to the empire's storied legacy. Moving to trials and training, Suppiluliuma's early years were shaped by the complex political landscape of the Hittite court. Faced with intrigue and challenges, he honed his military and diplomatic skills, exhibiting a remarkable aptitude for leadership. These formative experiences would serve as the crucible in which his extraordinary capabilities were forged. So, of course, being from a noble family, he got some of the best training across all areas. Moving to his ascension to kingship, starting with succession, crisis, and unity. In 1344 BCE, upon the death of his predecessor Arnuwanda II, the Hittite Empire faced a perilous succession crisis. Suppiluliuma's ascendancy to the throne marked a pivotal moment. His resolute leadership and unifying vision garnered support, ultimately quelling internal dissent and solidifying his rule. So his rule was contested as he first came into power, but the fact that he was able to solidify it once he sort of, dealt with that at the outset was sort of smoother sailings following, as we shall see. Moving to his military reforms and strengthening, recognizing the paramount importance of the military might in the era marked by territorial expansion and geopolitical complexity, Suppiluliuma embarked on a comprehensive military reforms. He bolstered the Hittites' army's size, training, and equipment, positioning it as a formidable force in the ancient Near Eastern stage. Moving to his military triumphs and territorial conquests, starting with the subjugation of the Mitanni. One of Suppiluliuma's most monumental feats was the conquest of the Mitanni kingdom in northern Mesopotamia. Through a series of brilliantly executed campaigns, he secured Hittite dominance over the strategic region, Upper Mesopotamia, profoundly expanding the empire's territorial reach. So we have here is that there were rulers in Anatolia, Levant, and Upper Mesopotamia. Not the entirety of all these regions, but this is under his rulership that they get into Upper Mesopotamia, which was, as we've covered, there are many great empires in Mesopotamia, so a significant achievement. Moving to his conquest of Arzawa. So Suppiluliuma's military acumen extended westward as well, where he successfully subdued the formidable Arzawa kingdom. This triumph further entrenched Hittite control over western Anatolia, fortifying the empire's position in the broader geopolitical landscape. So therefore he expanded in both in Upper Mesopotamia and to the west, so very significant expansion, and therefore putting him as most likely the most significant leader of the Hittite Empire. Moving to his diplomatic finesse and international relations, starting with the engagements with Egypt. Suppiluliuma's diplomatic prowess transcended battlefield triumphs. He engaged in negotiations with Egypt, culminating in the historic Treaty of Kadesh. This landmark agreement not only secured peace between the Hittite Empire and Egypt, but also established a precedent for diplomatic relations in the ancient world. So very significant, making allies with Egypt, because they're always a powerful force, starting with the Old Kingdom to the Middle Kingdom, with the Hyksos, and even to the New Kingdom. Moving to alliances and global standing. Suppiluliuma's adept handling of international relations elevated the Hittite Empire to unparalleled prominence. His alliances with neighboring powers and masterful navigation of diplomatic intricacies ushered in a period of relative stability and collaboration in the region. So amazing that he was able to expand and also have relative stability at home. Moving to his legacy and lasting influence, starting with the enduring impact of Suppiluliuma. Suppiluliuma's the first reign is celebrated as the apogee of Hittite dominance and influence. His military conquests and diplomatic triumphs fundamentally reshaped the course of the empire. The territorial gains and diplomatic stability established under his rule formed the bedrock of Hittite supremacy for generations to come. Moving to his perpetuation of the Suppiluliuman legacy. So Suppiluliuma's successors looked to his legacy as a guiding beacon for effective leadership, so inspiring further generations. The empire he bequeathed to his descendants stood as a testament to the profound and lasting impact of his visionary reign. Thus, Suppiluliuma's the first legacy as a conqueror, diplomat, and statesman resounds through the chronicles of Hittite history. His reign epitomized a period of unparalleled growth and influence in the Hittite Empire. Suppiluliuma's unwavering determination, strategic genius, and diplomatic finesse continue to inspire and resonate with historians, serving as an enduring testament to the transformative power of visionary leadership. So very, very fascinating leader to both expand but also quell issues at home, and also coming when he originally came into power, his throne was even contested. So having a harsh entrance into it, he managed to really prove that he perhaps was the greatest one, or the one who should have been king. So that is Suppiluliuma the First and the Hittite Empire. We will now discuss the content of the slide before discussing the leader more in a comparison with Apophis. So in the top left we have the deeds of Suppiluliuma, which are not in the best condition now, but we don't have any images of him, so that is the best representation that can happen. Those are the deeds, his deeds. In terms of some information, significant leader, Suppiluliuma the First, Empire Hittite, period 1650, circa 1650 to circa 1190 BCE. Million square kilometers, 0.45, million square miles, 0.17%, of the world, 0.33%, which is really quite large as well. But that excludes Antarctica, but this is very probably one of the most developed areas of the world as we know it. As far as we know, pardon me. Capital, Hattusa. However, it was Tarhuntassa under Muwatalli II. Government was under the Old Kingdom, it was an absolute monarchy and a constitutional monarchy under the Middle and New Kingdoms. Common language, Hittite, Hattic, Luwian, and Akkadian. So the Akkadian influence, as we covered, the Akkadian Empire still has an influence here. Religion, the Hittite religion. Population, several hundreds, so perhaps over 300,000 to a few million. So, and probably, certainly it varied over its time, probably largest under Suppiluliuma, but when it started, maybe smaller. And maybe it's even more than, or less than this range as well. Other images, and we have in the top left, next to the deeds of Suppiluliuma, the Great Temple of Hattusa. So one can still see it today. I'd be fascinated to see it. It looks absolutely beautiful and amazing architecture. To the right, we have the Hattusa ramp, which is it looks almost like a pyramid as well. down and left to that, we have an ivory sphinx, so they also worship sphinxes. To the right, we have the Alka-Hoyak Sphinx Gate, which is a very beautiful sight. Below that, we have the Hattusa Sphinx Gate as well, so lots of sphinx gates. To the right, Chimera, which is, I believe, a flying lion with a head, with a human head. Above that, we have a drinking cup in the shape of a hand, so I wonder what would have been drunk out of this cup, because I don't know if a hand is the most appetizing thing, but also we've seen people drinking out of heads, but I think that was for worship. A drinking cup out of a hand is quite peculiar. To the right, we have 12 Hittite gods of the underworld, so they believed in the underworld, and supposedly 12 gods. I think 666 is in supposedly the number of the beast. 12 is 2 times 6. I don't know if there's any connection there. Below that, we have an image of a chariot, so they also had a mastery of a chariot, but perhaps they learned this from the Hyksos. And in the top right, we have a map of the region in which they ruled, so expanding from Anatolia to Levant and Upper Mesopotamia. Once again, the title is Suppiluliuma, the first in the Hittite Empire, and the title we have for this is Rulers in Anatolia, Levant, and Upper Mesopotamia. So now into a comparison between Apophis of the Hyksos Empire and Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire. So the ancient Near East witnessed the rise of formidable leaders who left a profound mark on the region's history. Among them, Apophis of the Hyksos Empire and Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire, stand out as influential figures in the late Bronze Age. We will here delve into the respective backgrounds, reigns, military exploits, diplomatic endeavors, cultural impact, and their roles in shaping the ancient Near East. To learn more about them, their empires, and leadership as well, in the style of Plutarch's Parallel Lives, which I have covered in a series which I hope you endeavor to watch as well, or listen to. Starting with background and rise to power. Apophis and the Hyksos Empire, circa the 17th century BCE. Apophis is believed to have been a powerful ruler in the 15th dynasty of Egypt during the Second Intermediate Period. He was likely of Semitic origin, which distinguished him from the native Egyptian pharaohs of the time. Apophis ascended to power during the period of political upheaval, taking advantage of weakened central authority in ancient Egypt. Suppiluliuma I, on the other hand, of the Hittite Empire, circa 14th to 13th century BCE, so quite a long time after. Suppiluliuma I was a prominent Hittite ruler who reigned from circa 1344 to 1322 BCE, about 22 years, during the peak of the Hittite Empire's power. He hailed from the Hittite heartland and was a member of the Hittite royal family, so it doesn't seem like he was contested for the throne, displaying his Indo-European heritage. Suppiluliuma I came to power in a period of relative stability within the Hittite Empire, so quite differing there, inheriting a formidable state. So despite Apophis coming into a sort of a contested time, and Suppiluliuma coming into sort of a smooth transition, they both manifested the peak of their respective empires. Moving to military exploits, starting with Apophis of the Hyksos Empire. Apophis's reign witnessed ongoing conflict with the Theban rulers of Upper Egypt, who sought to reclaim control of the entire kingdom. He maintained a formidable military, likely comprised of a mix of indigenous and foreign forces, including Hyksos charioteers, which was a new innovation. Apophis's armies clashed with the Egyptian forces in the region of Avaris and the Nile Delta, reflecting his determined defense of the Hyksos territory. Moving to Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire. So Suppiluliuma I is renowned for his military conquests, expanding the Hittite Empire's borders through successful campaigns. He conducted campaigns against neighboring powers such as Mitanni, the Kizzuwatna region, and the Arzawans, significantly augmenting Hittite territory. Suppiluliuma I's military prowess was demonstrated in pivotal battles, including the conquest of the city of Karchemish and the subjugation of the kingdom of Kadesh. So, I'd say Suppiluliuma's the first exploits would be more characterized by conquering, whereas Apophis's military exploits would be probably more characterized by sort of keeping out the Theban rulers of the Upper Egypt. But nonetheless, he was a conqueror himself, and they were both, and probably maybe more noted for his diplomacy. But this is where we will cover the diplomatic endeavors, starting with Apophis of the Hyksos Empire. Apophis's reign saw attempts at diplomatic relations with the Theban pharaohs, though they were often strained due to territorial disputes. He engaged in correspondence with Sequenenre Tau, the Theban pharaoh, in an effort to maintain a degree of stability in his region, so but maybe less successful. So part of me, Apophis maybe was less successful in his diplomacy, but the Hyksos Empire generally was quite successful in diplomacy. Moving to Suppiluliuma of the Hittite Empire. So Suppiluliuma the first engaged in extensive diplomatic efforts, notably with the Egyptian pharaoh Amenhotep III and his successor Akhenaten. So he was more successful in his diplomacy with ancient Egypt, but ancient Egypt wasn't as powerful during his time as it was during Apophis's, when it was trying to create the new kingdom. The famous Marna letters document Suppiluliuma's the first diplomatic correspondence with other major powers at the time, showcasing his astute diplomacy. Moving to cultural impact, Apophis of the Hyksos Empire. Apophis's rule over Egypt as a foreign ruler with Semitic origins marked a significant cultural distinction from the native Egyptian pharaohs. His reign influenced the social and political dynamics of the second intermediate period in Egypt, leaving a legacy of foreign rule in Egyptian memory. So I think it's fascinating that he ruled perhaps as a minority, as we'll see. Suppiluliuma was sort of the majority, at least in his region. Suppiluliuma, the first reign, witnessed a flourishing of Hittite culture with significant contributions to art, architecture, and literature. So those are things that Apophis isn't as necessarily known for. His patronage of cultural endeavors left a lasting impact on the Hittite civilization, exemplified by the grandeur of Hattusa and the construction of monumental structures which still exist today, whereas many of the remnants of Apophis have sort of, after the new kingdom of Egypt came to rule over it again, were taken, destroyed. Some things that the Egyptians had made, the Hyksos claimed they had created, so nonetheless there aren't, however, as many remnants as there are with the Hittite Empire. Thus, Apophis of the Hyksos Empire and Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire, Apophis of the Hyksos Empire and Suppiluliuma, the first of the Hittite Empire, though hailing from different regions and backgrounds, were both formidable leaders who shaped the course of history in the ancient Near East. Apophis defended his empire in the face of internal and external challenges from start to finish, while Suppiluliuma the first expanded the Hittite empire's influence through military conquest and adept diplomacy, so sort of all was on the incline. Their reigns, though distinct, are testament to the intricate tapestry of ancient geopolitics and the enduring impact of strong leadership in the ancient world. So two very fascinating regions, two very fascinating empires. I very much hope you enjoyed this. I'm grateful that you watched and or listened to it, and I hope you continue to support me and this series on Ages of Empires. My name is Kalen Ashcroft, and this is Cashcroft TV. Thanks again.